The coronavirus pandemic as Georgia continues to battle increasing cases. The State Department of Public Health reporting nearly 1,800 new infections yesterday. 67 more people died and 162 more Georgians admitted to the hospital with severe COVID symptoms. And while it seems a number of infections are leveling off in our state after being in the pandemic for a year, we're noticing that hospitalizations are not dropping as quickly. Testing is now down from more than 40,000 tests per week in January to 22,000 tests per week currently. After hitting a peak in January, hospitalizations have fallen by 66%, but not as quickly as overall cases. Doctors say it's important people take the first vaccine that's available to them to prevent severe infections and hospitalizations. There could be new guidance as early as tomorrow for people who are fully vaccinated against the virus. The CDC set to release new guidelines. It will reportedly include a recommendation that people who are fully protected limit social interactions to small home gatherings and only include others who have been fully vaccinated. Everyone should also continue to wear masks and social distance in public. There will also be guidance for those planning to travel. We'll keep watching for that announcement, those new guidelines, and when we learn about them, we'll update you both on air and online. We're getting coronavirus updates around the clock. You can track the latest developments on cases across Georgia and COVID vaccines online at 11alive.com.